All right, now already in our fourth lecture, we're moving out of the period of the early church, and we're going to talk about this very long period that we call the period of the Christian Empire. Now, I know that perhaps you would be interested in spending more time in the early church, but I have to say we've really covered what I think are the dominant points of it, how they met and worshiped, just sort of what Christian life was like, some of the various threats that they faced, the whole phenomenon of persecution, the spread of the gospel, and then in particular, we also talked about some of the important people and writings of the period. So we could go into greater depth in any one of those areas, but I think you'll appreciate that because the Christian Empire lasts so long, this period that we're talking about, 312 AD, which basically concerns the conversion of Constantine to the year 1500 AD, that it's worth us spending a good amount of time on. Besides, I think what we're going to talk about now is really encompassing both the end of the early church period and the beginning of the Christian Empire period. You need to understand that at the end of the 3rd century and the beginning of the 4th, now again, is it kind of like this with you, that when you say 3rd century, you kind of begin thinking of the 300s, right? No, okay, the 300s is the 4th century. So whenever I say 3rd century, when I say the end of the 3rd century, you think the late 200s. Okay? When I say the beginning of the 4th century, you think the early 300s. I'm going to confuse myself if I keep talking about it. But at the end of the 3rd century and the beginning of the 4th, it looked honestly like Christianity might be doomed, or at least be beat back to something, nothing more than an insignificant faith with a few followers. Administrative changes in the Roman Empire, especially splitting it between East and West, and some very tough emperors, such as Diocletian and Galerius, who we discussed earlier, brought severe persecution for Christians. Now, starting in 298, Galerius rooted out all Christians out of the army and out of government jobs, which, by the way, there were a lot of Christians in the Roman army, and there were a lot of Christians in government jobs where they were all fired. In the year 303, a tremendous persecution against Christians began. Churches were destroyed, scriptures were seized and burned, and Christian services were prohibited from happening. It looked like Christianity might be stamped out. But then two very remarkable things happened at the very end of the early church period. The first remarkable thing was the Edict of Toleration, which was put into effect April 30th, 311. Galerius, this emperor who had been a very strong persecutor of the church, surprisingly issued the Edict of Toleration on his deathbed. Without admitting that he was wrong before, Galerius declared that he admired the determination and the tenacity of Christians in the face of persecution, and he decided that for the good of the empire, Christians should be allowed to meet in their congregations as long as they were orderly about it. He also asked Christians to pray to their God for the good of the empire. He established this significant official declaration of the toleration of Christianity in the Roman Empire. You have to say that actually it was the bravery of Christians in the face of terrible death and torture that changed the heart of this hardened Roman emperor. It's really one of the remarkable stories of church history. This Galerius was an extreme persecutor of the church, a vicious man. He hated the church. He tried for years upon years to destroy the church with one of the most severe persecutions that the church has ever seen. And again, on his deathbed, his heart was melted by the love and the courage and the persistence of the brave Christians that he saw die and who were tortured for the sake of Jesus Christ. Now, you can only imagine how this would be received in Christian circles, right? I mean, it would be rejoicing. Think about it. You're a Christian, in the Roman Empire during this time, and persecution is tough. I think sometimes it's very hard for us to understand in the Western world how stressful a season of persecution is. Listen, it's not that everybody has to be put into jail. Everybody has to be rounded up. If you had a congregation of 50 people, all you got to do is take one of them and torture him. And then you know what? You torture him, and then you send him back to the congregation. So everybody gets to see just how badly he was tortured. You can only imagine the fear and the stress and the anxiety that puts through communities of Christians. Every once in a while you hear it. And I suppose at times that I have said it myself, although I don't know if it was wise to say, but certainly every once in a while you hear it. Christians say things like, well, you know what the church needs today? It needs a good dose of persecution. Now, I understand why people say that, but listen, if you know what it's like from a historical context, not to mention a personal context, which I've never experienced, of course, but if you know what it's like from a historical context to live through these vicious seasons of persecution, you don't wish that upon anybody at any time. You say, Lord, make us brave enough to deal with the challenges of our own affluence, with the challenges of our own comfort and ease, without having to send persecution. Because let me tell you, seasons of persecution are vicious in the church. They genuinely are. And so, a lot of times as Christians, we tend to focus on the good stories of persecution, right? The brave men and women who see death through courageously or who endure torture. And hallelujah, there are many, many, many such stories. But let us never forget that persecution does take its toll upon the church. In any regard, Galerius was the man who did this radical transformation, this radical change by issuing the Edict of Toleration. You could say that his heart was genuinely melted by the courage of these believers. So that was the first radical thing that changed. The second radical thing that changed was the conversion of Constantine. But what I want you to notice was that the conversion of Constantine did not come first, right? First, before Constantine ever came to the throne, was this Edict of Toleration by Galerius. But Constantine's conversion was very important. In October of 312, the imperial throne of Rome was contested, and a young general named Constantine had the support of all the Roman armies of Britain and Gaul. You know where Gaul is, right? Modern-day France. He had the support of the armies in Britain and Gaul to be the next emperor. And so, actually, Constantine received the news of the death of the emperor and was proclaimed to be the new emperor by his armies while he was in the city of York. And so outside the York Minster or cathedral, there is a statue of Constantine the Great, and there is my son Nathan standing in front of that statue when he and I were on a trip to York. There's, again, this picture of Constantine declared to be the next Roman emperor by his army. Unfortunately, there was another man named Maxentius who also claimed to be the next Roman emperor, and Constantine and Maxentius were to fight it out. So Constantine marched with his armies from the north to meet the other claimant to the throne, Maxentius. And shortly before the armies were to meet in battle, Constantine said that he saw a cross of light in the sky. And then he read or heard, we're not exactly sure, but he either read or heard the words in Latin, in hoc signis vinces, which means, in this sign conquer. Do you understand? He sees a cross of light in the sky, and then he hears these words or reads them, whatever. It says, in this sign conquer. And Constantine was already beginning to reject the multiple gods of the Roman world. And as he rejected the multiple gods of the Roman world in favor of a single God, he regarded this light in the sky, this cross in the sky, as an important sign. Later, Constantine said that Jesus appeared to him in a dream and showed him the cross sign again. And this time, he saw the top of the cross was bent over, so that it sort of looked like, well, you might say it looked like the letter P with a cross symbol through it. This is what Constantine said that he saw. This looked sort of like the Greek letters chi and rho together, the first two letters of the Greek name Christ. Constantine believed that Jesus told him to mark his soldiers' shields with this sign. He did it. He went into battle against Maxentius, and he won. So Constantine was the